Give us an update on Brandon Sorensen's battle with leukemia. Do you have anything for us?
Brandon Sorensen is on the right track. Brandon Sorensen is, by definition, in remission, but he continues treatment. That's a good thing. There's more technology today, obviously, where they can detect minor setbacks. And the way that I had it explained to me is there was a minor setback 3 weeks ago, a month maybe, and it didn't mean that he was out of remission. It just meant that the way that they're looking at the numbers now, there's so much detail that the numbers looked like they weren't like where they needed to be, like maybe for a year down the road or 2 years down the road. Does that make sense to everybody, I hope? Even though he's doing really well. And so they looked at some options on that. He went to a couple places, had some tests done to decide the course of action. And right now it looks like he just stays with the status quo, what he's been doing. He's in phase 4, which is really good. He went from 1 to 2 to 3 and now to 4. And I don't want to say minor, but minor compared to 2 and 1 for invasiveness. So 1's really invasive, 2 is still pretty aggressive, 3 you start to, not as invasive, and then 4 and 5 are pretty much where you're not coasting, but compared to 1 in phases 1 and 2, you're coasting. So he's really progressing well. Can't say it any better than that. God is great.
Do you interact with him much?
I don't, meaning that we don't call or talk every day. I'm available. He's still on our payroll. That's not what's important to him. I know that. But you know what I said from the very beginning, that stranger things have happened on these things. He could still wrestle. And even if he never wrestles competitively again, he has so much to offer young people. Mentorship wise, the way he lives his life, the way he handled this, it's a no-brainer to keep him close to our program as long as he wants to stay here. And I know that guys get antsy and they move on and they got bigger and better fish to fry. But right now, he's still in our Hawkeye Wrestling Club, and I leave him alone. He has a battle to fight, regardless of whether that battle's going really well, regardless if he's in remission. I believe that the way that these battles are won is total effort into it, and that means very selfish. And I have to be selfless to allow that to happen. I believe that he has great support. His mom was a rock from the start, and Brandon was a rock from the start. His girlfriend Kelsey was a rock from the start, and then his entire family. But they're very humble people, and they don't want attention on them, and they don't want people to know that Dwight, his dad, is battling his own battle with some issues that are cancer related. And it's a story. It's a great story, and right now it looks like perseverance is going to be the end result, but perseverance is a process. So I pray for him every day, and that's where we're at with him.
You mentioned the Hawkeye Wrestling Club. You have someone new leading that, and Dan Dennis. What went into the decision to hire him as the head of that Hawkeye Wrestling Club?
Well, we had our turnover, and Mark Perry was, serenaded by Arizona State, and he wisely took that job. I say wisely because, he's a competitive guy, and he wants to be in Division I coaching, run his own program, and he saw what happened with Pendleton, and that made an impact on him. He wasn't getting maybe the attention from here that he thought that he warrants. I agree with that. He should be getting attention for coaching jobs, and he talked to the Sunkist leadership, and Felt like it was time to move, and felt like that they could maybe help him when and if another opportunity wrestles like the Oregon State happened with Chris Pendleton. Once that happened, we put our total focus into replacing that energy. Having that energy around is very important. We didn't miss a lot of steps, meaning a lot of time. The Mark Perry deal was done on a Thursday, and we had moved on Sunday. I remember a Sunday night where, Dennis, it was like a phone call on Saturday where, he was struggling a little bit leaving there. He had a lot of good relationships there and a good situation there. And I was completely hands off and waited another 24 hours. He called me Sunday night and he said, let's do it. And you know what I said? I said, let's do it.
Can you talk to that a little bit? From years ago, I remember you talking about when Mark Johnson left the Iowa program as an assistant. I think you said it kind of rocked your world, but then within a day you knew you had to move on. How do you move on from these situations using the story that you had with Mark Johnson?
It rocked my world, but the conversation that I had with him is, I'm with you always, and if you ever need anything, call me, even though I'm becoming the enemy. Mark Johnson is a warrior in spirit and mentality, a lot more than maybe a lot of coaches are. And at the time, I thought that was more normal. As I've gone 30 years or 25 years since then, I realized that's not as prevalent or normal. But I took to it. It was attractive to me. So we were like-minded a lot, and he's very, very loyal. And our conversations weren't frequent, but there was no hiccup or speed bump along the way. He was always up for a spirited conversation, a little jabbing, a little bit poking. And he was one of mine and Terry's favorites. Mark Ryland loved him as well. And to this day, all three of us are still close with him. So, I mean, if you're in a foxhole and you got to pick 2 or 3 guys, Mark Johnson's in the top 2 or 3, or maybe even 1.
And then has that moment helped you to put things in perspective on how you have to move?
I guess I didn't answer your question. So to answer your question, how did you move on? You knew it was good. You knew it was good. He wasn't going to undercut you or cheap shot you behind your back, or, everything was good when he was here and then he left, and then he whatever is the normal now. And it was a great lesson on me on continued loyalty. Mark Johnson is unique with his integrity. And because of his integrity, I was able to continue that relationship. I never really felt like I lost him, even though I didn't have those coach-athlete day-to-day interactions with him. It might be complicated what I'm talking about, but to me, it's not. It's unusual. It's rare, maybe. But loyalty is important to Mark Johnson. If you were going to talk about Mark Johnson's characteristics, he's a family man. He's a God-centered man, and he's loyal. So that's why I was able to move on, maybe, like you say. Still can joke with him to this day.
As far as it relates to the Hawkeye Wrestling Club, what kind of role do you see Dan Dennis having moving forward?
Well, we need a guy in there that's going to coach, and we need a guy in there that's going to fundraise, and we need a guy in there that understands the importance of both those. That's where, the world that the RTCs live in, that's where they thrive or become stagnant. You got to have money, and it's important. We have a great board. We have a great board president, Randy Novak. I say that all the time. Need to give everybody credit. Our donors are awesome. But you also need more than Tom and Terry Brands and Ryan Morningstar and Bobby Telford and the leadership of the program working on it. We are, coaching the college team, and the regional training centers have become a part of that, but it's such a big job that, Terry or me, we're not going to travel overseas to competition. We're just not in January, and that's where the RTC coach comes in. And we're excited to have Dan Dennis, no doubt. Very important because, when you recruit this elite mentality status that you're familiar with, I'm familiar with, that all Division I wrestling programs are familiar with, what do you talk to them about? You talk to them about getting a good education toward a meaningful career. You talk to them about the things that are important in your program, whatever those elements are. And then you talk to them about winning national, world, and Olympic championships. And when they're done with their eligibility, there has to be a springboard for them. That's very important that you follow through. That's that integrity. So it's important. Finances are important. The commitment with personnel is important. Having good teammates for them is important. So, you have a guy like Sam Brooks and Corey Clark and, Nathan Birak still around, and Pat Lugo joined us, and Jeremiah Moody joined us. And, it's important to keep good people here.
Well, with you saying that, how much do you have interaction with your current Iowa Hawkeye wrestlers about being part of the Hawkeye Wrestling Club after college?
You just took the next statement out of my mouth, because I started to go there in my head, and you beat me to the punch. And what I was going to say is, next year, a year from now, we have some pretty heavy hitters that are fully intent to pursue world and Olympic championships. And so it's not a conversation where, it dominates the day, but it's understood. And, from past experiences, you have to put that in front of them now and then. It's like dangling a carrot. It's like keeping them going. Boredom is a real pitfall for elite level athletes, especially when they're in a level where, it might look so automatic to them that, maybe it isn't. Maybe they are bored. So dangle that carrot out in front of them.
How much will a new wrestling facility, which you're in the progress of creating, how much will that help your program?
I don't know. Those are intangibles, I think. I mean, maybe it's tangible. I don't know. For me, it's the next step. We got our people. We are clearly behind. The status of Iowa wrestling warrants the best facility in the country, on the planet. And we're going that way, and we're going that way fast. And when I say fast, it's slow in some regards because it costs money, and we're not settling. A lot of fans want to know where we're at with it. And, our top donors are very engaged. There's always frustration with things that don't happen as fast as we want them to. But I know that our administration is proceeding as fast as they can. And I know that we're working hard, and I'm one of those in the we statement that's working hard to secure the money, to continue to work on the donors. And we hired an architect. That was a big step that needed to happen. We hired that through the COVID time. And the next step is to, engage them on what is needed, what's going to be in it, and then they go to work, and then they figure out what the total bill is going to be, and then we'll find out how much more money we have to raise. And that's basically it in the next basic steps, or the basic step process. Will it help our program? I think young people are geared funny sometimes. And, you got to remember something that's a fact with Gable. He had a blank check with his wrestling club with Roy Carver Sr., and he had a brand new facility with Carver Hawkeye Arena. And that's not why he won. He won because of commitment and his mindset and how he communicated to his athletes, recruited, developed, on and on and on. But it's an undeniable fact that he had those two things, and those two things are very important.
How do you build your subconscious mind to take over?
You realize that you're at a disadvantage right away. We're human. We make mistakes. We're negative. We're doubtful. We're pessimists. We want to replace God in our life with ourselves as being the center. And when you realize that, then you go to work on it meditation-wise, and you practice working on those built-in deficits or those built-in dysfunctions. And so you practice positive thoughts. It's that simple. And your brain's a muscle, and then all of a sudden becomes more second nature to do that. And then when bad things happen to you that seems like it's chaos and tragedy, all of a sudden it's automatic that, that good self-talk is kicking in. It's not that simple. I've been doing it a long, long time. And it's still hard, but the fact is that you get better with time. And, months into it, you will recognize change, even though it's a little change.
Were there ever times where you got complacent and things didn't go the way you wanted?
Yeah, of course. My career is very unfulfilling to me. But that doesn't mean that you went to the pity side of things or to, the dark side where it's woe is me, and you quit working on the things that you need to work on. And that's a Gable bedrock principle. That's a biblical bedrock principle. You work on the things that are important to you every day of your life. And even when things aren't going your way, you still got to wake up and you got to fight. You got to battle.
I've heard that there was a time in practice where you blacked out and you kept wrestling anyway. Do you remember that moment?
I don't know if I remember it. I know the story. I remember not several times. I remember a few times where you're in a scramble and you end up on top wrestling a pretty doggone good opponent in that practice room, and you don't remember how you got there. That's probably the start of that story, or the genesis of where that story came from. That happened more than once. That's a great feeling. That's probably the unconscious greatness that these goofy thrill seeker athletes get to and experience probably more than any other sport. But when you're wired to be the very, very, very best that you could be, and you work at it, and then all of a sudden those things are falling into place where all of a sudden, I am pretty good. And you say that, but it's not bold or cocky. That's when you get to those states in your mind, and it's happening. And there's no doubt as to the outcome. There's absolutely no doubt that you will prevail.
You talk about being wired a certain way. Do you find, since you are wired that way, it's hard to relate to people sometimes?
I think that the older I've gotten, I've said this before to you, that I realize how unique Terry and I were growing up, fighting for the same turf every minute of every day. And there was no ever either one of us taking a back seat. That's a very, very unique relationship. I've coached twins before. I've seen brothers before, and never saw it where there wasn't an alpha male. And even though they fought a lot, or maybe fought for the same turf, were competitive, went after each other, I'm not sure it was for blood every time. And I'm not ashamed to say that. We were best friends when it was over, and we were best friends when it was happening, probably. When you get to that point where you know that that guy isn't going to back down, and that's the same turf that I want, you have a choice. And I think it's a deep love when you fight him for it.
Legacies are important at the University of Iowa, maybe more so than a lot of programs. You lost a year of eligibility where legacies can get built. What does that do going forward on those legacies that could potentially have been built?
Legacies are in definition in how you handle adversity through the course of a legacy. If you're referring to Spencer Lee was developing a legacy, that fight's not over, first of all. Second of all, if you're talking about a guy like Lugo, who was robbed of his senior year, you got to remember something about really good people. They take direction with open mind, even when it's not fun or even when it's not easy. And this group has done that. Marinelli and Kemmer also lost a lot, even though they're not seniors. Spencer Lee didn't lose more than Marinelli and Kemmer and DeSanto and Cassiope just because he was going for his third out of three, for the Magic Four. He didn't lose more. It's all important to us in our own relevant ways. So how do you get past that? How do you continue to build your legacy through the hardship? And that is the right mindset. And you move forward. Our country's going to have to move forward through this period and I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about social unrest and the systemic racism and the police brutality. We have to. It's time. And why is it time more than ever before for me? Well, because maybe I had my head in the sand. Maybe. And for some reason, for me, this one's different. And so, okay, I realize, all right, hey, well, I never saw color. But that's not how the world is. There is color in the world. And there's things that we got to deal with and we got to move past. We got to educate ourselves on. And the first thing that I got to do is I got to have an open mind and listen. And listen to the context and then start to become part of the solution by listening to what's needed and then acting on it. And that's what our guys did through the COVID when they lost the national tournament. There was a lot of emotion. It sucked. And it still sucks. But they listened, they kept an open mind, and they got better through it. And at no point in our program was there more independence through the last 70 days or whatever, approximately. So good things happen, Good things happen from, you could call it chaos or uncertainty or these crazy times or whatever you want to call it, but some good can come out of this.
You've been involved in the Iowa program since you were a true freshman back in 87, 88. Where does Spencer Lee fall in the line of Hawkeyes that fans really are gravitating toward?
Spencer Lee doesn't want to bat the mouse around and play with him. He's not a fat cat. So I'm a fat cat and there's a mouse and I got him by the tail with my claw and he starts to get away and I grab him with my other claw and I reel him back in and I bat him around. He rolls around and I got him in front of me and I keep him alive for a little while just to play with him. And Spencer Lee, he wants to go out there and he wants to get off that mat as quick as possible. And he's a ferocious, vicious competitor. And his good nature and his taking time for his fans and how well spoken he is. You saw him when he won the Hodge. You saw him when he won the Sullivan Award. You saw how well spoken he was. That's a tribute to how he was raised, who he is, who he's becoming, the man he's becoming. But it disguises the element of his competitive side a little bit. And you don't see that except for in the wrestling room. That's what separates him. People want to compare him to the best in the program. And it's been probably since Lincoln McElravy, that we've had a guy that was that good coming right out of high school where he could step in and go with the best guys in the wrestling room.
How was he able to get to that point?
How was Spencer Lee?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he has the qualities. He's open-minded, and it wasn't easy. I mean, there's some stories behind the scenes, and I just don't like to let my guard down too much on this stuff, but there's stories behind the scenes where, he struggled. And, and it's no secret that our practices were open. That's changing with this COVID, but there would be some fans in there, and they would be openly critical that we favored Spencer Lee. And here's how my response would be. You doggone right we favor him. That was first. And secondly, we treat him exactly how he needs to be treated. And anytime that you have an issue with someone personally, what usually happens is before they own it, if they do own it, is they want to compare you to something else. They want to compare you to somebody else on the team that might be worse than them. And so when that's happening, you just say, stop, dude. And you say, we're not talking about that. We're talking about you. And Spencer Lee was mature enough right away to realize that we were talking about him. We weren't talking about the other guy. So we did favor him. And we will continue to operate that way with everybody.
It's an interesting topic with favoritism because you have multiple guys in the room. You have 30, 40 deep. How do you balance the pecking order and who you give time to?
That's what I'm talking about. It's what you need. And when we see something, we don't walk by it. The guys in our room that are the most comfortable with this coaching staff and the most at peace with their own careers moving forward are the ones that know that if there's something to be said, it'll be said one way or the other. And that's a great thing. That's a great thing that there's that kind of relationship and honesty in that relationship. Young people are typically, as you could expect, the new guys in the room are the ones that maybe struggle, and the ones that continue to struggle are the ones that basically eliminate themselves from contention. And it's never a situation where the coach lays his gavel down and says that's it. It's always the individual who did it to themselves. And that's another, Gable principle. Like Gable, all of a sudden after 300 days in his room, you're pretty doggone good. If you keep your nose in the grindstone. But if you battled him and you debated him and, you weren't going to be there long, let alone have a fun career in the end.
Do you think these guys understand that they're making progress, or does that go back to that subconscious where they're getting good, they don't even know about it?
I don't. The young guys need to trust the system probably more. I'm maybe talking like there's a lot of problems, and there's not. We recruit like we recruit the Division I pile, but we go a little bit deeper because this place is different. The coaching philosophy is different. The fans' expectation is different. And if you sign up for this, then you have to understand all those things. And so you don't miss. I'm not talking about like, oh, it's a 50-50 coin flip. We're very invasive in our process. And sometimes it takes guys 7 years to figure out that this place isn't for them.
What kind of things have you learned during this COVID?
I learned that patience is very important. I've learned that being patient and flexible is how you destroy the uncertainty and how you destroy the anxiety. I've always been wired that way to a certain degree where, my reputation and my antics on the corner in the mat, that type of thing, and how hard I competed, maybe it looked a little bit different, but I've always been like non-drama, a non-drama guy. I know that if I put my head down and I worked hard, there was nothing that could stand in my way. And well, this time COVID stood in our way. And so you become flexible and you become patient. And the funny thing about COVID is you were flexible and you were patient and you're talking to your team that way. Well, we're going to get to the next step. We didn't know what the next steps were. So it was 30 or 40 days before we even knew what the next steps might be. Are we even going to play football? How's the appeal process going to go? You saw a lot of teams run out and they did these appeal processes where they put them on public display right away. In our estimation, we didn't go that way because my athletic director, Gary Barta, does not want to hear from a winter sport on eligibility when he doesn't even know if we're going to play football or not in the fall. By the way, Kirk Ferentz butters our bread. He pays our bills. So it would be really silly of me to not be patient and open-minded and flexible those first 40 or 50 days or whatever. And now we're 70 some days into it or whatever it is, and we know more what our next steps are. We're taking those next steps. We don't know if there's going to be a limited schedule. We don't know where the Big Ten's going to fall out on this. Our commissioner is geared 100% toward what is best for the student athlete. So if there's any way that it's not safe, then we're going to have a threshold in the Big Ten when we compete that, it might not include the rest of the country until the national tournament. I don't know. Those are just things that have been talked about and discussed on the surface. But they're real. And so you got to be ready for them. And that's what I mean. So you're patient, you're flexible. You don't know what's coming. The next steps are starting to fall into place, but you're still uncertain. And to be anxious about unknown is silliness. Doesn't do you any good.
How has this changed how you communicate with your athletes?
Well, it didn't change how we communicate. It changed the method. We would get on that call and we would talk to them the same way that we talk to them face to face. That's somewhat of a problem, but there were some issues that needed to be handled right away with some individuals at the end of the year, like there always is. So we had to have some hard-hitting conversations, and then we had to have some team conversations that were right for the time. And the same. I mean, when the season's over, what happens? Well, you let your hair down. Well, you got to let your hair down in moderation, guys. And so you'd have the same conversation, just be over the phone. And it's hard to read guys over the phone. And you just do the best you can.
You looking forward to that first practice you get to have at the wrestling room?
We are taking those steps, and it's one of those things where, there's hills and there's concrete and there's bike paths and bicycles and there's weights and places that you can go now that are opened up. So, our guys are moving that direction, and we're humming. We're humming as hard as we can hum within the framework of what's, what the next steps are.
Of course, your two daughters are part of the program, but I see your son back there, Tommy. I think he's out in California. How are things going for him?
He's doing good. He got kicked out of California March 23rd. They shut down because of COVID, so he moved back to Iowa City. He did not move into this house. That's a you know what? That's a good sign. That means we raised him right. He didn't want to come back home. So he's doing well. Our family's doing well. I'm blessed. We got good people all the way around. The one thing that I've always said about our guys are they're good husbands and fathers, and they're good mentors. And, you know, that's becoming more and more every year when guys graduate, like Sam Brooks is, you know, I saw a change in Sam Brooks in the last 6 months or so, where he went from, you know, kind of that postgraduate to a real mentor. You know, he's got a graduate degree now, and he went to grad school. That was important to him. He stayed the course, and, you know, they delayed the 2020 Olympics, and he didn't even hesitate. You know, it wasn't even a conversation. He just re-upped his lease, and he's going to stick around for 2021 Olympics now. And, you know, that's great to see when you see those things happening.
You ever make it back to Sheldon, Iowa, where you're from?
I went there last summer. You know, there's some friends back there that have been trying to get Terry and I back there to have kind of a cookout. And for the last 10 years, I've given them excuses, I guess. And we go to Okoboji and do the golf outing. But last summer, I went and sat in the backyard in Sheldon, Iowa, Leon Klein Waltrink, and some staunch allies up there and some good friends. And it was awesome. It's been a while before then, and I haven't been back since. But I have nothing against Sheldon. Sheldon's a great place. Long ways from Iowa City, though.